Krishnamurti, in dialogue with Dr. Alan W. Anderson. J. Krishnamurti was born in South India and educated in England. For the past 40 years, he has been speaking in the United States, Europe, India, Australia, and other parts of the world. From the outset of his life's work, he repudiated all connections with organized religions and ideologies and said that his only concern was to set men absolutely, unconditionally free. He is the author of many books, among them The Awakening of Intelligence, The Urgency of Change, Freedom from the Known, and The Flight of the Eagle. This is one of a series of dialogues between Krishnamurti and Dr. Alan W. Anderson, who is professor of religious studies at San Diego State University, where he teaches Indian and Chinese scriptures and the oracular tradition. Dr. Anderson, a published poet, received his degree from Columbia University and the Union Theological Seminary. He has been honored with a Distinguished Teaching Award from the California State Universities.
Mr. Krishnamurti, in this series of conversations, we've been exploring the general question of the transformation of man, a transformation which, as you say, is not dependent on knowledge or time. And as I recall, we arrived at a point that was very crucial, namely the one concerned with relationship and communication. I remember one point in our conversation together that was extremely instructive for me, a point at which, when you asked me a question, I began to answer it, and you interrupted me and reminded the viewers and me that the important thing here is not to finish out a theoretical construction, rather to attain to the right beginning point so that we don't go beyond where we haven't yet begun. This, as I repeat, was extremely instructive for me, and I was thinking, if it's agreeable with you, that it would be helpful today if we could begin at the point of a concern for communication and relationship, to go into that question, begin to unravel it.
Unravel it, quite. I wonder, sir, what that word communication means. To communicate implies not only verbally, but also the listening in which there is a sharing, a thinking together, not accepting to something that you or I say, but sharing together, thinking together, creating together. All that is involved in that word communicate. And in that word is implied also the art of listening. The art of listening demands a quality of attention in which there is real listening, real sense of having an insight as we go along.
Yes.
Each second, not at the end, but at the beginning.
So that we are
together, walking together all the time.
Yes, yes, right. There's a concurrent activity here. Not one making a statement, the other thinking about it, and then saying, well, I agree, I don't agree, I accept, I don't accept. These are the reasons I don't accept, these are the reasons I do. But we are
journeying together, walking together on the same path, on the same road, with the same attention, with the same intensity, at the same time. Otherwise, there is no communication.
Exactly. Exactly.
Communication implies there must be at the same level, at the same time, at this, with the same intensity, we are walking together, we are thinking together, we are observing together, sharing together.
Would you say that this requires an activity that underlies the speaking together, or does one come to the activity after one has started to speak together?
No, no, sir. Well, we're not saying what is the art of listening, aren't we?
Yes.
The art of listening implies, doesn't it, that there is not only the verbal understanding between you and me, because we're both speaking English,
Yes.
and we know the meaning of each word, more or less, and at the same time, we are sharing the thing, the problem together, sharing the issue together.
Because, as you said, it's a matter of life and death.
Absolutely, that's it. If you and I are both serious, we are sharing the thing. So, in communication, there is not only a verbal communication, but there is a non-verbal communication, which is really, which comes into being, or which happens when one has the art of really listening to somebody, in which there is no acceptance, no denial, or comparison, or judgment, just the act of listening.
I wonder whether I'm on the right track here. If I suggest that there's a relation that's very deep here between communication and what we call in English communion.
Communion, yes.
So that if we are in communion, our chance of communicating...
Becomes simpler.
Right.
Now, to be in communion with each other, we must be, both of us must be serious about the same problem, at the same time with the same passion. Otherwise, there is no communication.
Exactly.
If you are not interested in what is being said, well, you will think of something else and communication stops. So there is a verbal communication and a non-verbal communication. They're both operating at the same time.
One doesn't precede the other or follow upon the other.
It is,
Yes.
yeah.
They move together.
Which means that each of us, being serious, give our attention completely to the issue.
That act of seriousness that takes place then requires the utmost devoted attention.
So, but
Yes.
A man who is really serious lives. Not the man who is flippant or merely wanting to be entertained. He doesn't live.
The general notion of being serious about something generally suggests either undergoing some pain about something, or I'm serious about something in order to get something else. These two things, as a rule, are what persons imagine by seriousness. As a matter of fact, we often hear this expression, "Don't look so serious."
Yes,
Don't we?
yes.
It's as though we fear something about the serious.
So, look, as we said yesterday, the world is in a mess.
Yes.
And it's my responsibility, living in this world as a human being who has created this mess, it's my responsibility to be serious in the resolution of this problem. I'm serious. It doesn't mean I'm long-faced, I'm miserable, unhappy, or I want something out of it. It has got to be solved. It's like going, if one has a cancer, one is serious about it. You don't play around with it.
Action in relation to this seriousness, then, is instantaneous.
Obviously.
Yes. This raises not an additional question. I don't mean to go beyond where we haven't begun in that sense. But time assumes for the serious person something very different for his undergoing than it would seem to be for the unserious person. One wouldn't have then the feeling of something being dragged out, or as we say in English, time that has to be put in.
Put in, quite.
As a matter of fact, one in this concurrent communication, in which communion is abidingly present, time as such would not in any way oppress.
No, sir. No, sir.
Am I...
Quite right. But you see, sir, I'm trying to see what it means to be serious. The intent, the urge, the feeling of total responsibility, the feeling of action, the doing, not I will do. All that is implied in that word seriousness. At least I put all those things into that word.
Could we look for a moment at one of them that,
yes.
You put into them, responsibility, able to be responsive.
That's right, to respond adequately.
Yes, to respond adequately.
To any challenge. The challenge now is that the world is in a mess, confusion, sorrow and violent, all that. I must, as a human being who has created this thing, I must respond adequately. The adequacy depends on my seriousness in that sense, on my observation of the chaos, and responding not according to my prejudices, my inclination or tendencies or pleasures or fears, but responding to the problem, not according to my translation of the problem.
Yes, I'm just thinking, as you're speaking, about how difficult it is to communicate this to the person who is thinking that the way adequately to respond to this chaos is to have a plan for it, which one superimposes on it.
So
and that's exactly what we assume.
Exactly.
And if the plan doesn't work out, we blame ourselves.
Or
and we
change
say,
the
well,
plan.
Or we change the plan. Yes.
But we don't respond to the challenge.
No.
We respond according to our conclusion about the problem.
Exactly.
Therefore, it means really, sir, if you can explore it a little more, the observer is the observed.
Therefore, the change, if it comes, is total,
Yes, that's
not
right.
partial.
Yes.
One is no longer outside what he is operating upon.
That's right.
And what he is operating upon is not outside himself.
Because, as we said yesterday, it's very interesting if you go into it rather deeply. The world is me, I am the world. That's not an intellectual or emotional, but a fact. Now, when I approach the problem, the chaos, the misery, the suffering, the violence, all that, I approach it with my conclusions, with my fears, with my despairs. I don't look at the problem.
Well, would you think it possible to put it this way, that one doesn't make room for the problem?
Yes, yes, put it in a way. Yes.
Would that be all right?
Yes. There is, so let's look at this. As a human being, one has created this misery, which is called the society in which we live. Mm-hmm. An immoral society. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes.
Completely immoral. As a human being, one has created that. But that human being, looking at it, separates himself and says, I must do something about it. The it is me.
Mm-hmm. Some people respond to that this way. They say, well, look, if I'm truly serious, I'm truly responsible, I make this act, and there comes between me and the world this confluent relationship, which is total. All the things that are going on out there that are atrocious, let's say 2,500 miles away from where I am, don't stop. Therefore, how can I say that the whole world is me and I am the whole world? This objection comes up again and again. I'm interested to know what your reply to that would be.
Look, we are human beings irrespective of our labels. English, French, German, all the rest of it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A human being living in America or in India has the problems of relationship, of suffering, of jealousy, envy, greed, ambition, imitation, conformity, and all that are our problems, common to both of us.
Yes.
And when I say the world is me and the world, me is the world and the world I am, I see that as a reality, not as a concept. Mm-hmm. Now, my responsibility to the challenge, to be adequate, must be not in terms of what I think, but what the problem is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, I follow you, I'm sure, here. I was thinking while you were saying that it might have been possible to answer the question that I posed, and I'm posing the question simply because I know some persons who might very well view this, who would raise that and want to participate with us in this conversation. I wondered whether you might have said that as soon as one puts it that way, one has already divorced himself.
That's right.
From the issue. That in the practical order, that question is an interposition that simply does not have a place in the activity that you are talking about.
Yes, that's right.
This is very interesting because it means that the person must suspend his disbelief.
Or his belief.
Or his belief.
Yes. And observe the thing.
And observe the thing.
Which is not possible if the observer is different from the observed.
Now, would you explore the practical aspect of this with me for a moment? people will say, who up to this point are listening, it would seem, people at this point will say, well, yes, but I can't stop it. I think I have an intuition of what you mean, they'll say. But the minute that I open myself, or begin to open myself, all these things seem to rush in on me. What I had hoped doesn't seem to take place. If I understand you correctly, they're really not doing what they claim that they're trying to do.
That's right. So can we put it this question differently? What is a human being to do confronted with this problem of suffering, chaos, all that's going on around us?
Yes.
What is he to do? He approaches it generally with a conclusion. What he should do about it.
And this conclusion is interposed between
Yes.
him...
The conclusion is the factor of separation.
Right.
Now, can he observe the fact of this confusion without any conclusions, without any planning, without any predetermined way of getting out of this chaos? Because his determined conclusions, ideas and so on are all derived from the past. And the past is trying to resolve the problem.
Yes, yes.
And therefore he is translating it and acting according to his previous conclusions, whereas the fact demands that you look at it. The fact demands that you observe it, that you listen to it. The fact itself will have the answer. Not, you don't have to bring the answer to it. I wonder if I'm making myself clear.
Yes, I'm listening very, very hard. I really am. I'm afraid if I'm not going beyond where I haven't yet begun, the next question that would naturally arise here, or perhaps you might feel when I raise the question that it's the wrong question, but can one communicate in the sense that we have been unraveling this? One says, I don't know. It doesn't seem to me that I've done this. One says, I haven't done this yet. I can recognize all the things that have been described that are terrible. I don't recognize all the things that appear to be promised without suggesting that I am imagining them or projecting them out there. Clearly, if there's to be a change, it has to be a change that's altogether radical.
Yeah.
Now, I must start.
So that
What do I do?
There are two things involved, aren't there? First, I must learn from the problem, which means I must have a mind that has a quality of humility. It doesn't come to, he says, I know all about it. What he knows is merely explanations, rational or irrational. He comes to the problem with rational or irrational solutions. Therefore, he is not learning from the problem. The problem will reveal an infinite lot of things if I'm capable of looking at it and learning about it. And for that I must have a sense of humility. I'm saying, I don't know. This is a tremendous problem. Let me look at it. Let me learn about it. Not I come to it with my conclusions. Therefore, I've stopped learning about the problem.
Are you suggesting that this act is a waiting on the problem to reveal itself?
That's right. Therefore, I must be capable of looking at it. I cannot look at it if I come to it with ideas, with ideations, with meditations of all very kind and conclusion. I must come to it and say, look, what is it? Not learn, or I must learn from it, not learn according to some professor, some psychologist, some philosopher.
Mm-hmm. That one has the capacity for this. Some persons would suggest.
I don't even know. Sir, we are so vain.
But this doesn't mean anything for the doing of what must be done, that there's a capacity.
No. The learning is the doing.
Exactly. Yes, yes. I wanted to make that clear because we comfort ourselves with the curious notion, if I've been following you, that we possess a possibility, and because we possess the possibility, we think that someday it will actualize itself, perhaps.
Quite.
But if I'm correct both ways, no possibility can actualize itself, and in the practical order that never occurs. But somehow it's believed, isn't it?
I'm afraid it is.
It is believed.
So it is really quite simple. There is this misery, confusion, immense sorrow in the world, violence, all that. Human beings have created it. Human beings have built a structure of society which sustains this chaos. That's a fact. Now, I come to it, a human being comes to it, trying to resolve it according to his plan, according to his prejudices, his idiosyncrasies or knowledge. Why? Which means he has already understood the problem. Whereas the problem is always new. So I must come to it afresh.
One of the things that has concerned me for many, many years as a reader, as a student, as one whose daily work involves the study of scriptures, is the recurrent statement that one comes upon, sometimes in a very dramatic form. For instance, take the prophetic ministry of Jesus, where he speaks and he says that they're hearing but they're not listening, they're observing but they're not seeing
and doing.
But then it seems that he doesn't say, in order to attain to that, do this.
Oh, no.
No, the closest he comes to it is through the analogy with the child. to have faith as a little child. Now, I don't want to talk about words here because that would be disastrous. I realize that. What's meant by faith here is not something that perhaps would be profitable to go into. But the analogy with the child suggests that the child is doing something that is lost somewhere along the way in some respect. I'm sure he didn't mean that there's a perfect continuity between the adult and the child, but why is it over the centuries that men have said this over and over again, namely, you're not listening, you're not seeing, and then they don't point to an operation, they point to an analogy, and then some of them don't even point to an analogy. They just hold up a flower.
So, look, we live on words.
Mm-hmm.
Most people live on words. They don't go beyond the word. And what we are talking about is not only the word, the meaning of the word, the communication that exists in using words, but the non-verbal communication which is having an insight. That's what we're talking about all the time, so far.
Yes.
That is, the mind can only have an insight if it is capable of listening.
Mm-hmm.
And you do listen when the crisis is right at your doorstep.
Now, I think I'm at a point here that is solid.
Yeah.
Solid. Is it that we don't allow ourselves access to the crisis? That's all that's there continuously. It isn't a crisis that's episodic.
No, crisis is always there.
It is all, right. Well, we're doing something to shut ourselves off from it, aren't we?
Or we don't know how to meet it. We don't know, either we avoid it, or we don't know how to meet it, or we are indifferent. We have become so callous.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All these things, all these three are involved in not facing the crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm frightened. One is frightened. One says, my Lord, I don't know how to deal with it. Someone goes off to an analyst or to a priest or picks up a book to see how it can be translated. He becomes irresponsible.
Or sometimes people will register the disappointment that things haven't worked out. So why try something new?
Yeah, of course.
And this would be a buffer.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what I mean. Avoidance of, there are so many ways to avoid. Clever, cunning, superficial, and very subtle. All that is involved in avoiding an issue.
Mm-hmm.
So, what we're trying to say, sir, isn't it? The observer is the past, as we said yesterday.
Yes.
The observer is trying to translate and act according to the past.
Mm-hmm.
When the crisis arises. The crisis is always new. Otherwise, it's not a crisis.
No,
A challenge must be new, is new, and always new. But he translates it according to the past.
Mm-hmm.
Now, can he look at that challenge, that crisis, without the response of the past?
May I read a sentence out of your book? I think that maybe this has a very direct relationship to what we're talking about. It's a sentence that I have to take these things off to read it. It's a sentence which arrested me when I read it. Through negation, that thing which alone is the positive comes into being.
That's right.
May I read it again?
Yes, sir.
Through negation, something is done,
Oh,
apparently.
absolutely.
Right. So we're not leaving it at the point where we're saying simply words are of no consequence, therefore I will do something nonverbal, or I will say something because I never communicate with the nonverbal. It has nothing to do with it. Something must be done.
Absolutely.
There is an
I mean,
act. Yes.
Life is action.
Exactly.
It isn't just
Now here, and I suppose I should say for our listeners and viewers that this is from The Awakening of Intelligence, I think the most recent publication of yours. And it's on page 196 in the chapter on freedom. Through negation, I take it that's a word for this act. For this act, that thing which alone is the positive. The word alone came over to me with the force of something unique.
Yes, sir.
Something that's not continuous with anything else. That thing which alone is the positive comes into being. There's no temporal hiatus here, so we're back to that thing we began with in our earlier conversations about not being dependent on knowledge and time. Could we look at this negation together for a moment? I have the feeling that if I've understood this correctly, that unless this, whatever it is that's called negation, is not an abiding activity, then communion and communication and the relationship that we were talking about just simply can never be reached.
Sir,
Is that correct?
quite. May I put it this way? I must negate, negate not intellectually or verbally, actually negate the society in which I live. The social, the implication of immorality, which exists in society, which is on which society is built, I must negate totally that immorality. That means I live morally. In negating that, the positive is the moral. I don't know.
No, I'm being quiet because I want to follow step by step. I don't want to go beyond where I've not begun.
Instance, I negate totally the idea of success.
Yes, I negate totally the idea.
Totally.
Yes.
Not only in the mundane world, not only in the sense of achievement, in a world of money, position, authority, I negate that completely. And I also negate success in the so-called spiritual world.
Oh yes, quite the temptation.
Both are the same. Only I call this spiritual and I call that physical, more mundane. So in negating success, achievement, there comes an energy. Through negation, there is a tremendous energy to act totally differently, which is not in the field of success, in the field of imitation, conformity, and all that. So, through negation, actual negation, not just ideal negation, through actual negation, that of that which is immoral, morality comes into being.
Which is altogether different from trying to be
And
moral.
that's of course. Trying to be moral is immoral.
Yes. May I try to go into this another step?
Yes.
At least it would be a step for me. There's something that I intuit here as a double aspect to this negation. I'd like very much to see whether this is concurrent with your own feeling about this. I was going to say statement, and I stopped myself. My desire for success in itself is a withholding myself from the problem
Yes.
that we talked about. And that itself is a form of negation. I have negated access to myself. I've negated in other words, I have done violence to what it is that wishes to reveal itself.
Yes.
So I am going to negate then my negation as the observer. This I wanted to
We
make
must
sure.
be clear, quite right, sir. When we use the word negate, as it is generally understood, it's an act of violence.
Yes, that's what I was
Yeah,
hoping.
it's an act
I
of
was
violence. I
on the way
negate.
toward. Yes,
I
yes,
brush it aside.
right.
We are using the word negate not in the violent sense, but the understanding of what success implies. The understanding of what success implies. The me who is separate from you, wanting or desiring success which will put me in a position of authority, power, prestige. So I am, in negating success, I am negating my desire to be powerful, which I negate only when I've understood the whole process that's involved in achieving success. In achieving success is employed ruthlessness,
Yes,
lack of love, lack of immense consideration for others, lack of and sense of conformity, imitation, accepting the social structure, all that is involved, and the understanding of all that. When I negate success, it is not an act of violence. On the contrary, it's an act of tremendous attention.
I've negated something in my person.
I've negated myself,
Right, I've negated myself.
the me which is separate from you,
Exactly.
and therefore I've negated violence which comes about when there is separation.
Would you use the term self-denial here? Not in the sense of how it has been received down the line,
No.
but that if there's anything to what has been stated in the past, could a person who saw that word, self-denial, read that word in this context that you're
I'm afraid
using?
he wouldn't. Self-denial means sacrifice, pain, lack of understanding.
But if he heard what you're saying,
Then why use another word when you have understood this thing?
well, maybe he'd want to
Confirmation.
he'd want to communicate with someone.
I would say, but change the word so that we both understand the meaning of self-denial. I mean, all religions have based their action on self-denial. Sacrifice. Deny your desire. Deny your looking at a woman, or deny your riches. Take a vow to poverty. You know, all the vow of poverty, vow of celibacy, and so on. All those are all a kind of punishment. A distorting of a clear perception. If I see something clearly, the action is immediate. So negate implies diligence. The word, diligence means giving complete attention to the fact of success. We are taking that word. Giving my whole attention to success. In that attention, the whole map of success is revealed.
With all its horrors.
With all the things involved in it. And it is only then, the seeing is the doing. And then it's finished. And the mind can never revert to success. And therefore become bitter, all the things that follow.
What you're saying, I take it, is that once this happens,
it's finished.
There is no reversion.
Of course not. Take, for instance, sir.
It isn't something that one has to keep up.
Of course not.
Well, fine. I'm delighted we've established that.
Now, take, for instance, what happened. In 1928, I happened to be the head of a tremendous organization, a religious organization. And I saw around me various religious organizations, sects, Catholic, Protestant, and I say, all trying to find truth. So I said, no organization can lead man to truth. So I dissolved it. Property, an enormous business, all that. I can never go back to it. When you see something as poison, you won't take it again. You say, by Joe, I made a mistake, I should go back. And it's like seeing danger. When you see danger, you never go near it again.
I hope I won't annoy you by talking about words here again. But you know, so many of the things that you say cast a light on common terms which, for me at least, illuminate them. They sound altogether different from the way they used to be heard. For instance, we say in English, don't we, practice makes perfect. Now, obviously, this this can't be the case if we mean by practice that we're repeating something.
Yeah.
But if we mean by practice the Greek praxis, which is concerned directly with act, not repetition, but with act.
Yes,
act.
sir.
Then to say it makes perfect doesn't refer to time at all. It's that upon the instant the act is performed, perfection is. Now, I'm sorry, but I use the word instant again, and I understand why that's awkward. But I think in our communication, the concern for the word here is one that surely is productive, because one can open himself to a word. And if one sees the word that way, then it appears that there's a whole host of phenomena which suddenly acquire a very magical significance. Not magical in the sense of enchantment, but they open a door, which when walked into, immediately situates him in the crisis in such a way that he attains to this that you call the one alone, the unique,
yes,
which comes into being.
Yes.
Which comes into being.
So, sir, can we now go back now or go forward to the question of freedom and responsibility in relationship? That's what we left off yesterday.
Right. Yes, and that was quoted from the chapter on freedom.
Yeah.
Yes.
First of all, can we go into this question of what it is to be responsible?
I should like that.
Because I think that is what we are missing in this world and what is happening now. We don't feel responsible. We don't feel we are responsible because the people in position, in authority, politically, religiously, are responsible. We are not. That's a general feeling that's all over the world.
Because those over there have been delegated to do a job by me. Yes.
And scientists, politicians, the educational people, the religious people, they are responsible, but I know nothing about it, I just follow. That's the general attitude right through the world.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Solzhenitsyn, you follow the whole thing.
Right. One feels he gets off scot-free that way, because it's the other one's fault.
Yeah, so I make myself irresponsible. By delegating responsibility to you, I become irresponsible. Whereas now we are saying, nobody is responsible except you. Because you are the world, and the world is you. You have created this mess, you alone can bring about clarity. Therefore you are totally, utterly, completely responsible, and nobody else. Now, that means you have to be a light to yourself. Not the light of a professor or an analyst or a psychologist or the light of Jesus or the light of the Buddha. You have to be a light to yourself in a world that is utterly becoming dark. That means you have to be responsible. Now, what does that word mean? It means really to respond totally, adequately to every challenge. You cannot possibly respond adequately if you are rooted in the past. Because the challenge is new. Otherwise it's not a challenge. A crisis is new. Otherwise it's not a crisis. So if I respond to a crisis in terms of a preconceived plan, which the communists are doing, or the Catholics or the Protestants and so on, then they are not responding totally and adequately to the challenge.
This takes me back to something I think that's very germane in the dramatic situation of confrontation between the soldier and the Lord Krishna in the Gita. Arjuna, the general of the army, says to Krishna, "Tell me definitely what to do, and I will do it." Now, Krishna doesn't turn around and say to him in the next verse, "I'm not going to tell you what to do." But of course, at that point, he simply doesn't tell him what to do. One of the great Sanskrit scholars has pointed out that that's an irresponsible reaction on the part of the teacher. But if I'm understanding you correctly, he couldn't have done otherwise.
When that man put that question, he is putting a question out of irresponsibility.
Of course, a refusal to be responsible. Exactly, a refusal to be responsible.
That's why, sir. Responsibility means total commitment.
Total commitment.
Total commitment to the challenge. Responding adequately, completely to a crisis. That is, that the word responsibility means that. To respond. I cannot respond completely if I'm frightened. Or I cannot respond completely if I'm seeking pleasure. I cannot respond totally if my action is routine, is repetitive, is traditional, is conditioned. So to respond adequately to a challenge means the me, which is the past, must end.
And at this point, Arjuna just wants it continued right down the line.
That's what everybody wants. Huh? Politically, look what's happening in this country and elsewhere. We don't feel responsible. We don't feel responsible to how we bring our children up.
I understand. I really do. I think in our next conversation, I'd really like to continue this in terms of the phrase that we sometimes use, being responsible for my action. But that doesn't seem to be saying exactly what you're saying at all. As a matter of fact, it seems to be quite wide of the mark. Good. Let's do that.
Krishnamurti, in dialogue with Dr. Alan W. Anderson. J. Krishnamurti was born in South India and educated in England. For the past 40 years, he has been speaking in the United States, Europe, India, Australia, and other parts of the world. From the outset of his life's work, he repudiated all connections with organized religions and ideologies and said that his only concern was to set men absolutely, unconditionally free. He is the author of many books, among them The Awakening of Intelligence, The Urgency of Change, Freedom from the Known, and The Flight of the Eagle. This is one of a series of dialogues between Krishnamurti and Dr. Alan W. Anderson, who is professor of religious studies at San Diego State University, where he teaches Indian and Chinese scriptures and the oracular tradition. Dr. Anderson, a published poet, received his degree from Columbia University and the Union Theological Seminary. He has been honored with a Distinguished Teaching Award from the California State Universities.
Mr. Krishnamurti, just at the point where we left last time in our conversation, we had raised the question of the distinction between the notion that I must be responsible for my action and just being responsible.
That's it.
I was sitting here thinking to myself, oh, why can't we go on? So perhaps we could start at that point. Would that be agreeable?
Sir, there is a very definite distinction between responsible for and being responsible. If being responsible for implies a direction, a directed will, but the feeling of responsibility implies responsibility for everything, not in a direction, in any one particular direction. Responsible for education, responsible for politics, responsible the way I live, responsible for my behavior. It's a total feeling of complete responsibility, which is the ground in which action takes place.
I think then this takes us back to this business of crisis we were talking about. If the crisis is continuous, then it's misleading to say I'm responsible for my action because I've put the thing out there again, and it becomes an occasion for my confusing what is at hand that requires to be done and the concept of this notion of my action, because I am my action.
Yeah, that's it.
I am it.
That means I am feeling of responsibility expresses itself politically, religiously, educationally, in business, in the whole of life, responsible for the total behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Not in a particular direction. I think there is a great deal of difference. When one says I'm responsible for my action, that means you are responsible for your action according to the idea that you have preconceived about action.
Exactly, yes. People sometimes will say that the child is free because it's not responsible.
Oh, child is you can't take, you can't take a child.
No, of course not. But I think sometimes when we say this, we have this nostalgia for the past, as though our freedom would be freedom from constraint. Whereas if one is his action genuinely,
there
absolutely,
is no restraint.
There isn't any restraint at all.
No, not at all.
Right.
Because
right.
Look, if one has this total feeling of responsibility, then what is your responsibility with regard to your children? It means education. Are you educating them to bring about a mind that conforms to the pattern which the society has established? Which means you accept the immorality of the society that is. If you feel totally responsible, you are responsible from the moment it's born till the moment it dies. The right kind of education, not the education of making the child conform, and worship of success, and the division of nationalities which brings about war. You follow all that you are responsible for, not just in a particular direction. Even if you are in a particular direction, I'm responsible for my act. What is your action based on? How can you be responsible? When your action is the result of a formula that has been handed down to you.
Yes, I quite follow
Like
what you mean.
communists, they say the state is responsible. The state worship the state. The state is the God.
Yes.
And you are responsible to the state. Which means they have conceived what the state should be, formulated ideationally, and according to that you act. That's not a responsible action. That's irresponsible action. Whereas action means the doing now, the active present of the verb to do, which is to do now, the acting now. The acting now must be free from the past. Otherwise, you're just repeating, repetition, traditionally carrying on. That's not.
I'm reminded of something in the I Ching that I think is a reflection of this principle that you pointed to. I don't mean principle in the abstract. If I'm quoting it correctly from one of the standard translations, it goes like this: the superior man, by which it means the free man, not hierarchically structured, does not let his thoughts go beyond his situation, which would mean that he simply would be present as he is, not being responsible to something out there that's going to tell him how to be responsible or what he should do. But upon the instant that he is always responsible. His thoughts, he simply does not let his thoughts go beyond his situation. That goes back to that word negation. Because if he won't let his thoughts go beyond his situation, he's negated the possibility for their doing so, hasn't he?
Quite.
Yes. Oh, yes. I see that. The reason that I'm referring to these other quotations is because if what you're saying is true, and if what they say is true, quite without respect to how they're understood or not understood, then there must be something in common here. And I realize that your emphasis is practical, eminently practical, upon the act. But it does seem to me to be of great value if one could converse, commune with the great literatures, which have so many statements in them that complain about the fact that they're not understood. I see that as a great gain.
Sir, I have not read any books, any literature in the sense.
Yes, I understand.
In that sense. Suppose there is no book in the world.
Problem is the same.
Problem is the same.
Of course.
There is no leader, no teacher, nobody to tell you do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. You are there. You feel totally, completely responsible.
Right. Yes.
Then you have to have an astonishingly active, clear brain. And not befuddled, not puzzled, not bewildered. You must have a mind that thinks clearly. And you cannot think clearly if you are rooted in the past. You're merely continuing, modified perhaps, through the present to the future. That's all. So, from that arises the question, what is the responsibility in human relationship?
Yes, now we're back to relationship.
Because that is the basic foundation of life. Relationship, that is to be related, to be in contact with.
We are presently related. This is what is.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, what is human relationship? If I feel totally responsible, how does that responsibility express in relationship? To my children, if I have children, to my family, to my neighbor, whether the neighbor is next door or 10,000 miles away, is still my neighbor. So what is my responsibility? What is the responsibility of a man who feels totally, completely involved in this feeling of being a light to himself and totally responsible? I think this is a question, sir, that has to be investigated.
Yes, I'm. You know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking that only a person responsible, as you have said it, can make what we call in our tongue a clean decision.
Of course, of course.
So many decisions are frayed,
Sir, I would like to ask this. Is there a decision at all? Decision implies choice.
Yes.
Choice implies a mind that's confused between this and that.
It means, I think, radically to make a cut, to cut off.
Yes, but a mind that sees clearly has no choice. It doesn't decide. It acts.
Yes. Doesn't this take us back to this word negation again?
Yes, of course.
Might it not be that a clean decision could be interpreted in terms of what takes place at this point of negation?
Yes.
From which flows a different
But
action.
I don't like to use that word decision. Because the deciding between this and that.
You don't want to use it because of the implications in it of conflict.
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 I see.
Choice. We think we are free because we choose. We can choose, right? Or is a mind free that is capable of choice? Or is a mind that is not free that chooses? A choice implies between this and that, obviously. Now, which means the mind doesn't see clearly, and therefore there is choice. A choice exists when there is confusion.
Yes.
Mind that sees clearly, there is no choice. It is doing. I mean, I think this is where we've got into rather trouble when we say we are free to choose. Choice implies freedom. I say on the contrary. Choice implies a mind that's confused and therefore not free.
What occurs to me now is the difference between regarding freedom as a property or quality of action rather than a state.
Oh,
Yes, but we have the notion that freedom is a state,
no.
a condition, which is quite different from the emphasis that that you're leading me
Yes,
into.
that's right.
Yes, yes, yes.
So let's come back to this thing, sir, which is, what is the responsibility of a human being who feels this sense of in relationship? Because relationship is life. Relationship is the foundation of existence. Relationship is absolutely necessary, otherwise you can't exist. Relationship means cooperation. Everything is involved in that one word. Relation means love and generosity and all that's implied. Now, what is a human responsibility in relationship?
If we were genuinely and completely sharing, then responsibility would be present fully, would
Yes,
it not?
but how does it express itself in relationship? Not only between you and me now, but between man and woman, between my neighbor, between relationships, to everything, to nature. What's my relationship to nature? Would I go and kill the baby seals?
No, no.
Would I go and destroy human beings, calling them enemies? Would I destroy nature, everything, which man is doing now? He's destroying the earth, the air, the sea, everything, because he feels totally irresponsible.
He sees what is out there as something to operate on.
Yes, which is, he kills the baby seal, which I saw the other day in a film, which is the appalling thing. And a Christian, they call themselves Christians, going killing a little thing. For somebody's, for some lady who put on the fur.
Mm-hmm.
And you follow the totally immoral, the whole thing. So, to come back, I say, how does this responsibility show itself in my life? I'm married. I'm not, but suppose I'm married. What is my responsibility? Am I related to my wife?
The record doesn't seem very good.
No, not only record, actuality. Am I related
Right.
to my wife?
Right.
Or am I related to my wife according to the image I have built about her? And I'm responsible for that image. You follow, sir?
Yes, because my input has been continuous with respect to that image.
So, I have no relationship with my wife if I have an image about her. Or if I have an image about myself when I want to be successful and all the rest of that business.
Since we were talking about now, being now, there's a point of contact, I take it, between what you're saying and the phrase that you used in one of our earlier conversations, the betrayal of the present.
Absolutely.
Yes. If one...
You see, that is the whole point, sir. If I am related to you, I have no image about you or you have an image about me. Then we have a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
We have no relationship if I have an image about myself or about you. Our images have a relationship. But in actuality, we have no relationship. I might sleep with my wife or some, but it is not a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It's a physical contact, sensory excitement, nothing else. So my responsibility is not to have an image.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This brings to mind I think one of the loveliest statements in the English language, which I should like to understand in terms of what we have been sharing. These lines from Keats' poem Endymion. There's something miraculous, marvelous in this statement, it seems to me, that's immediately related to what you've been saying. A thing of beauty is a joy forever. And then he says, as though that's not enough, he says its loveliness increases.
Right.
And then, as though that's not enough, he says it will never pass into nothingness.
Right.
Now, when the present is not betrayed, it's full with a fullness that keeps on abounding.
It's quite understand.
Would I be correct
Yes, I
in
think
that?
so.
I think that's truly what he must be saying. And one of the things, too, that passed my mind was he calls it a thing of beauty. He doesn't call it a beautiful thing.
No,
it's a thing of beauty, as though it's a child of
Right,
beauty.
right.
Marvelous continuity between this. Not it's beautiful because I think it's beautiful, and therefore it's outside. This... Yes.
Come, I must stick to this because this is really quite important. Because go where you will, there is no relationship between human beings. And that is the tragedy, and from that arises all our conflict, violence, the whole business. So, when there is this responsibility, the feeling of this responsibility, it translates itself in relationship, which doesn't matter with whom it is, a freedom from the known, which is the image. And therefore, in that freedom, goodness flowers.
Goodness flowers.
And that is the beauty. And that is beauty. Beauty is not an abstract thing, but it goes with goodness. Goodness in behavior, goodness in conduct, goodness in action.
Sometimes while we've been talking, I've started a sentence with if, and I've looked into your eyes, and immediately I got it out. I knew I'd said the wrong thing. It's just like a minute ago, you said if, and you said no, when.
Yes.
Yeah. We're always ifing it up.
I know, ifing it up.
It's awful.
I know. We're
yes,
always dealing with abstractions rather than with reality.
Immediately we if. A construction is out there which we endlessly talk about.
That's right.
And we get cleverer and cleverer about it. And it has nothing to do with anything.
Correct.
Yes.
So, how does this responsibility translate itself in human behavior? You follow, sir?
There would be an end to violence.
Absolutely.
Wouldn't taper off.
You see what we have done, sir? We are violent human beings, sexually, in every way we are violent human beings. And not being able to resolve it, we have created an ideal of not being violent. Which is the fact, an abstraction of the fact, which is non-fact, and try to live the non-fact.
Yes. Immediately that produces conflict because it can't be done.
Conflict, misery, confusion, all the rest of it. Now, why does the mind do it? The mind does it because it doesn't know what to do with this fact of violence. Therefore, it's in abstracting the idea of not being violent postpones action. I am trying not to be violent. And in the meantime, I'm jolly well violent.
Yes.
And it is an escape from the fact. All abstractions are escape from the fact. So, the mind does it because it is incapable of dealing with the fact, or it doesn't want to deal with the fact, or it is lazy and say, well, I'll try and do it some other day. All those are involved when it withdraws from the fact. Now, in the same way, the fact is our relationship is non-existent. I may say to my wife, I love you, I'm etc., but it's non-existent. Because I have an image about her and she has an image about me. So, on abstractions we have lived.
It just occurred to me that the word fact itself, which there have been no end of disquisitions about.
No, of course. Fact, what is, let's call it what is.
But actually it means something done.
Done, yes.
Not the record of something, but actually something done, performed, act. And it's that sense of fact that with our use of the word fact, give me facts and figures. We say in English, no, give me facts. We don't mean that when we say it.
No.
No. If one probably wouldn't need facts and figures in that abstract sense.
This is
yes,
this reveals a tremendous lot.
I follow.
When you feel responsible for education of your children. Not only your children.
Mm-hmm.
Are you educating them to conform to a society? Are you educating them to merely acquire a job? Are you educating them to the continuity of what has been? Are you educating them to live in abstractions, as we are doing now? So what is your responsibility as a father, mother, doesn't matter who you are, responsible in an education, for the education of a human being? That's one problem. What is your responsibility if you feel responsible for human growth, human culture, human goodness? What's your responsibility to the earth? To nature? You follow? It is a tremendous thing to feel responsible.
This just came to mind, which I must ask you about. The word negation in the book that we looked at earlier, which is continuous with what we're saying, I think is itself rather endangered by the usual notion that we have of negation, which is simply a prohibition, which is not meant.
No.
Which is not meant.
Of course.
When we reviewed that incident in the Gita between the general and his charioteer, the Lord Krishna, the Lord's response was a negation without it being a prohibition.
Quite.
Wasn't it?
I don't know. I'm.
No. I mean, in terms of what we just got through seeing.
Course,
yes. There's a difference then between rearing a child in terms of relating to the child radically in the present, in which negation, as is mentioned in the book here that we went through, is continuously and immediately and actively present, and simply walking around saying to oneself, now I'm rearing a child, therefore I mustn't do these things, and I mustn't do those things, I must do that. Exactly. An entirely different thing. But
so
one has to break the habit of seeing negation as prohibition.
And also, you see, with responsibility goes love, care, attention.
Yes, earlier I was going to ask you about care in relation to responsibility. Something that would flow immediately, naturally. Yes. Not something that I'd have to project that I needed to care for later.
Yeah.
And so I won't forget. But I would be with it. Yes.
See, but that involves a great deal too, because the mother depends on the child, and the child depends on the mother or the father, whatever it is. So that dependence is cultivated. Not only between the father and the mother, but depend on a teacher. Depend on somebody to tell you what to do. Depend on your guru.
Yes,
so
I'm
gradually, the child, the man, is incapable of standing alone. And therefore he says, I must depend on my wife for my comfort, for my sex, for my this or that and the other thing. I'm lost without her. And I'm lost without my guru, without my teacher. It becomes so ridiculous. So when the feeling of responsibility exists, all this disappears. You are responsible for your behavior, for the way you bring up your children, for the way you treat a dog, a neighbor, the nature. Everything is in your hands. Therefore, you have to become astonishingly careful what you do. Careful, not I must not do this and I must do that. Care. That means affection, that means consideration, diligence. All that goes with responsibility, which present society totally denies. When we begin to discuss the various gurus that are imported in this country, that's what they are doing, creating such mischief, making those people unfortunate, thoughtless people who want excitement, join them, do all kinds of ridiculous, nonsensical things. So we come back. Freedom implies responsibility. And therefore freedom, responsibility means care, diligence, not negligence, not doing what you want to do, which are what is happening in America. Do what you want to do. This permissiveness is just doing what you want to do, which is not freedom, which breeds irresponsibility. And I met the other day in Delhi, New Delhi, a girl, and she's become a Tibetan. You follow, sir?
Yes.
Born in America, being a Christian, brought up all that, throws all that aside, becomes a Tibetan, which is the same thing in different words.
Yes. As a Tibetan coming over here and doing it.
Because it's all
Right.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I've known her some years. I said, where is your child? Was sick. Oh, she said, I've left him with other liberated Tibetans. I said, at 6, you are the mother? She said, yes, he's in very good hands. I come back next year and I ask, where is your child? Oh, he has become a Tibetan monk who is 7. He's 7 years old and has become a Tibetan monk. You understand, sir?
Oh, yes, I do.
The irresponsibility of it. Because the mother feels they know better than I do. I am Tibetan and the lamas will help me to become.
It puts a rather sinister cast on that biblical statement, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. There's a sinister note in that, isn't there?
Absolutely. So this is going on in the world all the time. And a man who is really serious negates that. Because he understands the implications, the inwardness of all that. So he has to deny it. It isn't a question of will or choice. He says that's too silly, too absurd. So freedom means responsibility and infinite care.
The phrase that you just spoke, infinite care,
Yes, sir.
would be totally impossible to what we mean by a finite being, unless the finite being did not betray the present. With not betraying the present, it's a negative again. It's a negation again. With not betraying the present, which is not to say what will happen if it's not done. Right.
The word present, the now, is rather difficult.
Oh, yes, yes. Philosophers love to call it the specious
And
present.
I don't know what philosophers say. I don't want to enter into all that speculative thinking. But the fact, what is the now? What is the act of now, the present? To understand the present, I must understand the past. Not history, I don't mean that.
No.
Understand myself as the past. I am the past.
In terms of what we said earlier about knowledge.
Yeah, I am that.
Yes.
Therefore, I must understand the present, the past, which is me. The me is the known. The me is not the unknown. I can imagine it's the unknown, but the fact is, the what is the known. That's me. I must understand myself. If I don't, the now is merely a continuation in modified form of the past. Therefore, it's not the now, not the present. Therefore, the me is the tradition, the knowledge, in all the complicated maneuvers, cunning, of all that, the despairs, the anxieties, the desire for success, fear, pleasure, all that is me.
Since we're still involved in our discussion about relationship here, might we return a moment to where we were with respect to education?
Yes, sir.
And relationship? I want to be sure that I've understood you here. Let us say that one were fortunate enough to have a school where what you are pointing to was going on.
We are doing it. We have got
Marvelous.
several schools.
Marvelous. Well, we'll have a chance to talk about that, won't we?
Yes.
Good. If I'm current here, it would seem that if the teacher is totally present to the child the child will feel this. The child won't have to be instructed in what this means then.
So, that means
Is that
really
right?
That, yes, but one has to find out what is the relationship of the teacher to the student.
Yes. Yes, I quite see that. Of
What
course.
is the relation? Is he merely an informer in giving information to the child? Any machine can do that.
Oh, yes, the library is filled with
And
it.
any machine can. Or what is his relationship? Does he put himself on a pedestal up there and the student down there? Or is the relationship between the teacher and the student, is it a relationship in which there is learning on the part of the teacher as well as the student? Learning.
Yes.
Not I have learned and I'm going to teach you. Therefore, in that, there is a division between the teacher and the student. But when there is learning on the part of the teacher as well as on the part of the student, there is no division. Both are learning.
Yes.
And therefore, that relationship brings about a companionship,
A sharing.
a sharing,
A sharing. Yes.
and taking a journey together. And therefore, an infinite care on both sides. So it means, how is the teacher to teach mathematics or whatever it is to the student, and yet teach it in such a way that you awaken the intelligence in the child, not about mathematics.
No, of course not. No. Yes.
Huh?
Yes.
And how do you bring this act of teaching in which there is order? Because mathematics means order. The highest form of order is mathematics. Now, how will you convey to the student in teaching mathematics that there should be order in his life? Not order according to a blueprint. That's not order. You've heard?
Yes. Yes.
Therefore, it's a creative teaching. And not create. It's a teaching, it's an act of learning all the time. So it's a living thing. Not something I've learned and I'm going to impart it to you.
This reminds me of a little essay I read many years ago by Simone Weil, which she called On Academic Studies. There's some title like that. And she said that every one who teaches a subject is responsible for teaching the student the relation between what they're studying and the
Their
students
life.
making a pure act of attention.
I know, of course. Of course.
And that if this doesn't take place, the whole thing doesn't mean a thing.
So that
one stops to think, what would a teacher say if a student walked up and looked at them and said, fine, we're studying calculus right now. Now, you tell me how I am to see this that I'm pursuing in relation to my making a pure act of attention. Well, it would be likely a little embarrassing, except for the most unusual person who had who had a grasp of the present. Yes.
So, sir, that's just it.
Yes.
What is the relationship of the teacher to the student in education? Is he training him merely to conform? Is he training him to cultivate mere memory, like a machine? Is he training, or is he helping him to learn about life? Not just about sex, the life, the whole immensity of living, the complexity of it, which we're not doing.
No. No, even in our language, we refer students to subject matters.
Yes, yes, yes.
They take this, they take that, they take the other. And in fact, there are prerequisites for taking these other things. And this builds a notion of education which has absolutely no relationship to what...
None at all.
And yet, amazingly, in the catalogs of colleges and universities across the country, there is, in the first page or so, a rather pious remark about the relation between their going to school and the values of civilization. And we have this whole, and that turns out to be learning a series of ideas. Well, I don't know whether they do it anymore, but they used to put the word character in there. They probably decided that's unpopular. Might very well have dropped that out by now. I'm not sure. Yes, yes. Yes, I'm following what you say.
So when you feel responsible, there is a flowering of real affection. A flowering of care for a child. And you don't train him or cultivate, condition him to go and kill another for the sake of your country. You follow? All that is involved in it. So we come to a point where a human being, as he is now, so conditioned to be irresponsible, how is that, what are the serious people going to do with the irresponsible people? You understand? Education, politics, religion, everything is making human beings irresponsible. I'm not exaggerating, this is so.
Oh no, you're not exaggerating, yes.
Now, I see this as a human being. I say, what am I to do? You follow, sir? What is my responsibility in face of the irresponsible?
Well, if it's to start anywhere, as we say in English, it must start at home. It would have to start with me.
So I say, that's the whole point. I have to start with me.
Right.
Then if from that question arises, then you can't do anything about the irresponsible.
No, exactly.
No, sir. Something strange takes place.
Well, I misunderstood you. I'm sorry. What I meant by replying there is that I don't attack the irresponsible.
No.
Yes, go ahead. Yes.
Something strange takes place, which is consciousness. The irresponsible consciousness is one thing.
Yes.
And the consciousness of responsibility is another. Now, when the human being is totally responsible, that responsibility unconsciously enters into the irresponsible mind. I don't know if I'm conveying anything.
Yes, no, go ahead.
So look, I'm irresponsible. Suppose I'm irresponsible. You are responsible. You can't do anything consciously with me. Because the more you actively operate on me, I resist.
That's right. That's right. That's what I meant by no attacking.
Attacking. I react violently to you. I build wall against you. I hurt you. I do all kinds of things. But you see that you cannot do anything consciously, actively. Let's put it that way.
Designedly.
Designedly, planned, which is what they're all trying to do. But if you can talk to me, to my unconscious, because the unconscious is much more active,
Oh, yes.
much more alert, much more sees the danger much quicker than the conscious. So it's much more sensitive. So if you can talk to me, to the unconscious, that operates. So you don't actively, designedly attack the irresponsible. They have done it. And they have made a mess of it.
Oh, yes, it compounds,
Yeah,
complicates
yeah.
the thing further.
Whereas if you talk to him, you talk to me, but your whole inward intention is to show how irresponsible I am, what his responsibility means. You follow?
Yes.
You care. In other words, you care for me.
Yes, yes. I was chuckling because the complete and total opposite crossed my mind, and it just seemed so absolutely absurd. Yes. No, I'm...
You care for me
I do.
because I am irresponsible. You follow?
Exactly.
Therefore you care for me. And therefore you are watching not to hurt me, not to... You follow? In that way you penetrate very, very deeply into my unconscious. And that operates unknowingly when I'm... Suddenly I say, by Joe, how you follow? That operates. I have seen this, sir, in operation, because I've talked for 50 years, unfortunately or fortunately, to large audiences. Tremendous resistance to anything new.
Yes.
Say, if I say, don't read sacred books, which I say all the time, because you are just conforming. Obey. You're not living, you're living according to some book that you have read. Immediately there is resistance. Who are you to tell us
Not to do something.
not to do this or to do that? So I say, all right. See, I go on pointing out. I'm not trying to change them. I'm not doing propaganda, because I don't believe in propaganda. It's a lie. So I said, look what you do when you are irresponsible. You are destroying your children. You send them to war, to be killed and to be maimed and to kill and to maim. Is that act of love? Is that affection? Is that care? Why do you do it? And I go into it. They get bewildered. They don't know what to do. So it begins to slowly seep in.
Well, at first, it's such a shock. It sounds positively subversive to some.
Oh,
Yes.
absolutely, absolutely subversive.
Of course. Yes, but
So we enter into now something, which is my relationship to another, when there is total responsibility, in which freedom and care go together. I do not, the mind has no image in relationship at all. Because the image is the division. Where there is care, there is no imagination, no image.
this would lead us into what perhaps later we could pursue, love.
Oh, that's a tremendous thing.
Yes, yes.
We have to go
Could
into
we lay a little few words before that? I don't know necessarily that next time we would do that, but it would come naturally. I've been listening to what you've been saying, and it's occurred to me that if one is responsible and care is continuous with that, one would not fear. One could not fear.
Yes, sir.
Not would not, could not,
Is not
could
capable.
not fear.
No, but you see, that means really one must understand fear.
One must understand fear.
And
Yes.
also the pursuit of pleasure. Those two go together. They're not two separate things.
What I have, what I've learned here in our discussion is that what it is, if I followed you correctly, that we should turn ourselves toward understanding, is not what are called values.
Oh no.
We don't understand love. We understand all those things which we catch ourselves into,
Which are
that
not.
militate against any possibility whatsoever. This is what's so hard to hear, that to be told that there just is no possibility.
Yes, sir.
This produces immense terror. Do you think next time when we converse together, we could begin at that point where we could discuss fear?
Oh yes.
Good.
But sir,
Good.
before we enter fear, there is something which we should discuss very carefully. What is order in freedom?
Fine. Fine. Yes. Yes.